Hi, this is Amy with a Y from Secular Soup, and I took a left at the Valley.
I know we shouldn't have to scream that we're atheists. You know, we don't have non-astrologers and all that. But with the religious people taking over the world, I mean, we can either speak up or be pushed into a corner.
I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith in unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist.
Coming at you from Beelzebub's Barbecue, this is Left of the Valley 2.0. My name is Kevin, and may I remind you that whether it's 1 or 10 sins, you're going to hell. So why not do 1,000 sins and go down there a legend? Joining me as usual is the new team that will point out that plateaus are the highest form of flattery.
Ooh!
That's think about that one. So tell your big brother is not watching you because you're really boring as fuck. Sabrina.
Hey, how you doing?
And he knows that sex before marriage is a sin unless it's doggy style, because all dogs go to heaven. Bradley.
That was a good one. I like that one. I should have a follow-up.
Woof, woof.
Oh, good answer.
Guys, welcome back. Hope you had a great week.
Yeah, it was good.
Fantastic.
It was a nice week for weather, mostly.
Yeah. So this week we're actually going to have David Fitzgerald on the show, and we'll be talking about the lesser-known Gospels, the one that didn't really make the cut. And that's in the second half of the show. But first, let's do a bit of chit-chat. As I was telling Brent before the show there, the Conference on Religious Trauma, we had Janice Selby on the show in the previous year. They had to cancel that because of COVID. While Court 2021 is coming back, and it's from May 11th to the 16th. So it's a conference that basically talks about religious trauma. You have such alumni as Dr. Del Rey, Dan Barker, Dr. Terry Daniel, Dr. Clint Heacock, and Nate Phelps, and many, many more will be there. And as a listener of Left of the Valley, if you go in and put in code POD, P-O-D 15, POD 15, it actually gives you a discount to attend the virtual conference. Woo-hoo! So that's for our listeners, so you guys know. And we're going to be talking more about this when Janice is actually on the show in the next couple of weeks or so.
Sounds good.
So that's May 11th to the 16th. Okay. Quick news here. Remember the Atlanta shooter we talked about a couple of weeks ago?
Ooh, you suck.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who basically went and basically shot
the
massage parlor. Well, guess what? His Baptist church, the church he attends to, or it's called the Crab Apple First Baptist Church in Atlanta.
What?
Yeah, the Crab Apple
Church.
Church.
They're going to pay for his dispense?
No, they basically started deleting the sermons they had.
Oh.
What?
Because they realized that the sermons they had might have led to his picking up a gun and doing stupid shit. Right?
Yeah.
I don't have the details on the sermons, but right there, when you start to delete the sermons that you...
What do you delete, like from YouTube?
Oh, well, they have a website.
They took them off the website.
Wow.
From what I understand, they forgot, though, about the fact that they had put up a bunch on Spotify.
Oh,
and
really?
they were all still up there, so...
Quick, everyone go record.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that a lot of people have been pointing out, including ourselves, that, this might be racially or racially motivated.
Just slightly.
But we haven't talked too much about how this is actually motivated a lot by the faith of the individual, and this is another reason why we fight as atheists. Okay, moving on.
Yeah.
Canada's Conservative Party, we've talked about this for a little while now. They have a national council. They have a group, it's called the National Council. It's a group within the Conservative Party. This group, the National Council, they control the party's budget. They create bylaws and they set the rules for local nomination races. Well, it turns out that anti-abortion groups have set themselves up to control the National Council, and now has about 25% control right now, as we speak, of the board of directors, and especially one of the groups is actually called Right Now as well. So that's kind of funny.
That's kind of scary.
So kind of makes you wonder, what does this mean, right? And we had a story, I think it was last week or the week before, where we basically talk how the leader of the Conservative Party tried to put in the platform of the party that climate change is actually a thing. The debate is over. It's actually a thing, and they couldn't even pass that, right? And he was pretty pissed off because saying, we're giving liberals basically a a free pass, so they can say basically, oh, well, you have a bunch of climate change deniers and science deniers, and this is why, because part of the party is actually being controlled by social conservatives and being controlled by anti-abortion groups. So the kind of nonsense, I can understand people that are fiscally conservative. I got no problem with
Absolutely.
that. I understand that very clearly. But the social conservative, they're the wacky part of the group.
The scary part.
Scary part of the group, and it seems
Thankfully,
that.
Canadians get it, though.
Well, do they? You
For
know,
the most part.
do they? Because
even
we
though
know
the left is split, we still generally have a left government.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean,
So, could you imagine if the left came together?
I know. But still, I mean, we know in the States the Republicans have gone completely wacko off the deep end. But it seems the Canadian Conservatives are almost trying to head the same way, and hopefully it doesn't.
What's that premier's name in Ontario? Ford?
Yeah.
He's scary.
Okay.
They like to infiltrate stuff. It's almost like our Supreme Court in America, you know? It's like they've basically
Infiltrated.
Yeah.
like every Supreme Court justice that they've put on is like off of the Federalist Papers, Federalist lists, you know, and so it's always anti-abortion folks.
With Supreme Court judges, is it the same here in Canada, where once they're in for life?
Oh yeah, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Cushy
yeah.
job.
In other news, you know the riot that happened on January 6th at the Capitol? Well, there's a particular rioter there, and he's also owner of a coffee shop in Lisbon, Ohio. I'm not going to mention his name there, but he's telling basically his patrons that Biden voters to not come to his shop.
So he wants to go to business.
Well, I mean, what an idiot this guy. So he's basically saying Biden supporters, transgenders, and people taking a knee for the national anthem are not welcome in his shop. So you basically, I don't know, just by sheer quick numbers, you basically said to 60% of your clientele to basically go fuck themselves.
Where's the Ohio, you said?
Ohio, yeah.
And is that, what kind of state is Ohio? Is it a conservative state or a...
I think it's conservative.
I would think so, too. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it
Just
goes
curious.
red most of the time.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
So, good luck with him, man.
Well, I'd like to check in with him in about 12 months and see if he's still in business.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I didn't even know if that was legal. I mean, I know the Biden voting thing, that I guess technically can be legal because you're allowed to, not give service to anybody that you don't want to unless it violates a discrimination active one way or another. And
but if you're doing
LGBTQIA plus is definitely
if you're doing business and you're gonna refuse service on something as stupid as your voting preference, well, you really
What if they do? You're standing at the door going, how did you vote?
Yeah,
Show me your voter card.
yeah, how are they? I guess you could just lie. You could be like, yeah, Trump's great, and then just sort of
wait a minute,
like just say the talking points, and they'll be like, yeah, he's one of us.
Wait a minute, you're wearing a blue tie, you're not allowed here.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, lock her up. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. That's
Okay,
right.
all right.
It's kind of ironic that it's blue and red, and then Bloods and Crips, and... I just got the
Take the
correlation.
shot from that.
The government's run by gang members.
In science news, you guys ever heard of dire wolves?
Of what?
Dire wolves.
Dire wolves.
Yeah, they were really popular on Games of Thrones.
Oh, see, I never watched Game of Thrones, so...
They are real, though.
They're real. They're real. It's
I've never watched it, but okay, keep talking. I'm interested.
It's like
We'll have to chat after the show.
I'm sheltered.
They're portrayed as a much bigger wolf than a regular wolf.
Okay.
Okay,
Where are they found normally? Do you
Well, they're
know?
extinct now.
Oh.
Right? So they were long thought to be a canine, a part of the canine branch, but a new study basically says they're not related at all. So apparently they're not related to wolves at all.
So they're not a wolf.
Yeah, they call them dire wolves, but it's apparently it's not that. So these animals lived in North America until about 13,000 years ago. That's when they went extinct, and they were about 20% bigger than a regular wolf. DNA, they've managed to sample some DNA from a lot of different skeletons and all that, and basically get some fragments of them, and they basically revealed that. The dire wolf was essentially a new genetic lineage altogether, separate from African jackals, wolves, coyotes, etc.
What?
So we picture them as big, like gray wolves, like the regular wolf, but just bigger. But turns out they probably would look more like a coyote, kind of like slim, but just still bigger, and probably reddish in color as well. So that's pretty interesting.
Very.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember figuring out that they were real because, I watched, Game of Thrones, and you're like, that's fucking awesome. They're like on all fours, they could like look me in the face, they're that tall,
Crazy.
And I was like, man, that's so cool. And then I found out they were real. I was like, what the fuck? When was that?
It's interesting.
I guess they were around with people, too. It wasn't like so long ago.
13,000 years ago, they were still around. So, the humans, of course, Homo sapiens has been around for about 250,000 to 350,000 years ago. So, yes, we did cohabit with dire wolves.
For a long time.
For quite a long time.
That must have been scary for those folks.
Or we could very well have a hand in their demise as well, of course.
Could, yeah.
I wonder if we rode them. That'd be cool.
Like a horse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? They don't really gallop like horses. I'm not sure you'd be able to hold on like a horse.
Right.
They kind of bounce a bit, right?
Right, because they'd be about the size of like a pony, like a big pony.
That's awesome.
And in other news, scientists are warning that there's a chemical called, I'm going to massacre this, but it's called, I think it's called phthalates. They're causing babies to be born with deformed genitalia. So, yeah, essentially they're saying the penises are shrinking. Mm-hmm. So there's Dr. Shauna Swan. She writes about the crisis in fertility rates. Phthalates, whatever. It's a chemical that's used in manufacturing plastics, and it impacts the hormone-producing endocrine system. Yep. So a study in 2017 sees a drop in 50% in sperm level over the past 4 decades. Damn. Yeah, so it seems that men might not be able to produce sperm at all by 2045 if this keeps going.
Uh-oh.
And we keep and it's in plastic stuff, like every time you drink out of plastic, or
the study didn't say, but it seems that plastic is probably the source where you'll find these chemicals. Mm-hmm. So it could very well be so that we ingest it. It could be in the environment. It could be could be anywhere essentially. So this raises an alarm. But at the same time, I keep thinking to myself, if there's one problem old white men will fix, they'll be shrinking penises. So,
right.
I'm not too concerned about that at this point.
Like, I don't care if he dies from the massive flooding from climate change and everything, but his penis isn't going to be all right. Now we gotta do something.
We gotta fix those greenhouse gases. Let's go.
I think that's a solution to all our problems. Just
tell them that their dick's gonna fall.
Just tell them everything wrong with the planet is going to make their dick limp, and it's just going to be solved right there. That's how you solve the crisis. Any crisis,
absolutely.
All my money, just fix it.
Yeah, take my money, please. Here's my wallet.
And anything you want to promote like marijuana, just tell them it's good for your dick. And it's just going to
walk around with a razor.
It's going to be legal. It's going to be legalized in no time.
You're right.
I think it's actually scientifically proven to enhance sexual experiences.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I know, you're sober.
But, it kind of makes sense because after all, we laughed about this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the gun nuts.
Yeah.
And putting testicles on your gun. So, if you feel the need to actually feel like so manly with your gun, then why not use that same kind of psychology for every problem we have?
Right.
Oh, perfect. All right, my dear Sabrina, you got a top 10 for us?
I do.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so next week is April Fool's Day.
Ooh.
And you're the consummate jokester, so...
Me?
Yeah, no, not you at all. No.
That's
so
right.
I just decided to do the top 10 April Fool's jokes of all time.
Ooh.
Nice.
This was fun to do.
Yeah, I bet.
Okay, number 10. A rain-deflecting open-top car.
Ooh,
Yes.
I like that.
On April 1st, 1983, BMW's UK division ran an ad in British papers saying that one of their engineers had designed a sunroof that could be kept open, even when it rained, due to jets of air that blasted the water away from the top of the car. The system was said to be completely automated and could even be used in a car wash.
What?
The ad told people to call the marketing department and ask for Miss April Worst for more information. This actually, BMW was one of the first companies to kind of jump on board for April Fool's ads.
Nice.
And they are one of the most consistent, long-standing companies to do April Fool's jokes, and so
I like it better.
Yeah. So number 9 was the Swiss spaghetti harvest.
Oh yes, I know that
heard
one.
Of the Swiss? How about you, Brent? Have you heard of the Swiss spaghetti harvest?
No, I haven't heard of
Oh,
it.
listen to this.
This is
Brent.
awesome.
This is so good.
So on April 1st, 1957, the respected BBC news show Panorama...
This is the BBC.
BBC, yeah. They announced that thanks to a very mild winter and the virtual elimination of the dreaded spaghetti weevil, Swiss farmers were enjoying a bumper spaghetti crop. I'm trying really hard to say this with a straight face. It even showed footage of Swiss peasants pulling strands of spaghetti off of the trees. So many viewers. This gets better. So many viewers were taken in. People even called and asked how they could grow their own spaghetti tree. Stop so I can finish.
These people have never watched Mr. Rogers go into a painting before,
The
apparently.
BBC had the perfect response. They replied, place a sprig of spaghetti in a tin of tomato sauce and hope for the best.
The windowsill, there's a little can of tomato sauce with some spaghetti strands in it, hoping it's gonna grow.
Oh, that one was a good one. Good job, BBC.
Oh god, I love that.
I mean, it's lasted. This is 50 years ago. Well, more than 50 years. 53, 54 years ago now.
Oh my god. We were so funny back then.
We were. A lot of these are quite old, actually. So, number 8 is Alabama changes the value of pie. So the April 1998 issue of the New Mexicans for Science and Reason newsletter contained an article that claimed that the Alabama state legislature had voted to change the value of pi from 3.14159 to the biblical value of 3.0.
You know what? Just because you said biblical,
Yeah.
that all of a sudden became all too real
Yep.
to me.
So the article made its way online. Really, there was online back in 1998, but it was a little bit more rudimentary than today. So the way things went viral back then is it went through email.
Oh.
So there was a viral email chain, and it became apparent how viral the article became because the Alabama legislature started getting hundreds of phone calls from people protesting the legislation.
But you can totally see Alabama doing something like that.
Absolutely.
This is why it's brilliant.
Yeah, because that's so reasonable. I mean, that screams Alabama to be like,
does.
no, we want to make
We
it
want
so numbers are like they are in the Bible.
Yeah, some of these are really good. So number
I'm
7.
going to tell you how to grow your own spaghetti tree.
Number 7 is the Space
spaghetti
Needle
plant.
collapses.
The Space Needle collapses.
Yes! On April 1st, 1989, Seattle's Almost Live comedy show started their program with a news flash that the Seattle Space Needle had collapsed. They even had photos showing the Space Needle on its side in a pile of rubble. After the commercial break, the show's host announced it was a joke. However, thousands of people were fooled, and the Space Needle reported receiving over 700 phone calls, and 911 lines were jammed from the sudden influx of calls of people asking for more information. So they were totally taken in, even though they're watching a comedy show. It's like, did you forget what day of the week it is?
He's going to call 911. I'm stuck under the Space Needle and the rubble's killing me. Please help.
Yep. Number 6 is the robbery of the Us Treasury.
Oh, boy.
This is a really, really old one.
Okay.
On April 1st, 1905, a German newspaper called the Berliner... This is the word I was trying to learn how to pronounce last night.
Okay.
Tageblatt. I'm sure I've wrecked it. It's a newspaper anyways. They broke the news of the shocking and massive crime. All the gold and silver in the U.S. federal treasury had been stolen.
Oh, God.
They reported that a group of thieves that were funded by American millionaires had tunneled beneath the Potomac River and then beneath the treasury, robbing it from below. It was said that the U.S. government was desperately trying to conceal the crime, even as they pursued the thieves around the world.
A conspiracy theory. That's beautiful right there.
American millionaires.
Making a conspiracy there.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And you know what? I'll bet you if you scour the internet today, that is still a conspiracy theory that works.
So, so much of the German media just accepted this story as fact, and they reprinted it without question.
Oh, wow.
So then it made it a major news story across Europe.
And can you imagine how did the markets react to that?
1905, right? So it's 1905. There is no internet. There's no telephone. There's nothing, right? So the story, it made its way across Europe, and then eventually it made its way to the U.S. And the U.S. newspapers were just kind of like, ha ha ha, you guys are so stupid over there. So, but ultimately, it's actually believed that the story was so readily reprinted and believed at the time because Europeans actually believed that the States were just a country that was in the grips of millionaire criminals. You know, kind of like today.
Kind of like today, yeah.
I wonder why they think that. That's just so crazy that they think that.
It's a shame it doesn't say, what effects it actually had on the markets.
Stock markets? I should look. I don't know.
The actual effect.
That's a good question. Yeah.
It's really hard to say with the way news... Yeah, I'll look. Now you got me wondering.
You're going to have to check some records of April 5th or something stock market from 1905.
Was the stock market around in 1905? Yeah, it must have. Well, it crashed in 1920. Yeah. Anyway, so number 5, whistling carrots.
Oh?
Yeah.
Whistling carrots?
Yeah. So on April 1st, 2002, Tesco, which is a British grocery store chain, they ran an ad in The Sun that announced the successful development of whistling carrots. The ad explained that the carrots had been genetically modified and especially engineered to grow with tapered air holes in their side. So, when they were it gets better. When they were fully cooked, the air holes would cause the carrots to emit a, quote, 97 decibel signal to indicate that they should be removed from the stove. So just to give you guys a reference, because I don't know, 97 decibels is equivalent to the noise level of a jackhammer.
Yeah.
It's extremely fucking loud. Really, really loud.
So, of course, the opponents to this said, this is a nightmare scenario for future generations. They're going to become deaf as a post, but they'll have improved vision.
That's so funny. That's like my joke. Nikki hates it because it's I do it so frequently, but you have to do it frequently, otherwise it's not funny. Every time carrots are brought up, no matter what the conversation, no matter who I'm with, those are good for your eyes. And I'll do it over and over and over again in the same conversation because it's fucking hilarious. Because everybody does that. I don't know why.
Especially because it's been proven wrong, actually.
Yeah.
Has it really?
Yeah, it was something truly believed for a long time, but I think that it's been proven to have no effect.
Yeah, it falls into the same category as spinach is good for Popeye and all that stuff. It falls into the same category.
So, number 4 is smell-o-vision.
Oh, boy.
So, on April 1st, 1965, the good old BBC, they interviewed a London University professor who had perfected a technology called smell-o-vision. It allowed the transmission of smells over airwaves so that people at home could smell what was on TV. The professor demonstrated the technology by putting coffee beans and onions into the smell-o-vision machine, and they asked the viewers to report whether they smelled anything. A number of viewers called in to say they had distinctly smelled coffee and onions. Some even said the onions made their eyes water.
Oh my god.
What?
Yeah, it's amazing how gullible humans can be.
Right, dude. People can convince themselves of anything. They like it to be true.
Well, I can understand smell-o-vision being good for the food channel.
Yeah, right? Could you imagine it on the ID channel when they're finding someone who's been dead for 6 months?
What's the point of the food channel? I don't understand the food channel.
The food channel actually helped me gain 20 pounds when I desperately needed to, so I'm very grateful for it.
It's I can't taste it, I can't smell it, I just can see it, and that's the least amount.
It would make me hungry.
Anything that matters with food.
Number 3 is canned unicorn meat.
Oh boy.
Did you hear about this one? This one's not too long ago. This is April 1st, 2010. Online retailer.
In 2010?
Yeah, in 2010, online retailer. It's awesome. ThinkGeek. Have you ever heard of ThinkGeek?
ThinkGeek, no.
ThinkGeek. It's a online. They sell gag gifts and whatnot, I believe. Anyways, they announced an exciting new product. It's canned unicorn meat, which they described as the new white meat and an excellent source of sparkles. While it is unlikely that anyone really fell for this joke, it was really so popular that they started selling the product for real. Anyone who ordered it would receive a stuffed toy unicorn inside a can.
Oh, well, that's cute.
So it is cute, right?
That's cute.
So this is for everyone except for customers in Germany.
Okay.
You know why?
No.
Because apparently, German customs has a ban on the importation of meat from rare animals.
Oh.
And they believed unicorns to be a rare animal.
An extremely rare animal.
The most rare.
The rarest one out there. And so they actually thought there was meat inside the can.
Jeez.
So they just didn't allow it to come into the country.
Toss up between leprechaun meat and unicorn meat, you know.
Hey,
Which one's
leprechaun
more
meat is
rare?
delicious, man.
Don't knock the leprechaun.
It has a mint flavor to it.
Number 2.
Tastes like whiskey. I don't know what you're
Number 2 is one that I really believe we need to just do.
Okay.
Metric time.
Oh, boy, that'd be good.
On April 1st, 1975, an Australian news show called This Day Tonight announced that the country would soon be converting to metric time. Under the new system, there would be 100 seconds to every minute, 100 minutes to every hour, and 20 hours in a day. Seconds would now be called millidays, minutes are centidays, and hours would be decadays.
Oh my god.
The news outlet went all out to make the joke believable. They had an interview with the deputy premier who praised the new system, and the Adelaide town hall was shown with a new 10-hour metric clock face. And the guy that was actually doing the report was standing there with a little tiny metric clock, a little alarm clock with the metric numbers 1 through 10. The show actually got hundreds of calls from viewers who fell for the joke, including one guy who wanted to know how to reprogram his newly purchased digital clock to the new metric system. And the number 1 greatest April Fool's joke of all time was the origin of April Fool's Day has been revealed. So we started this list way back in 1983, and we're going to go back to finish this. So on April 1st, 1983, the Associated Press reported that the mystery of the origin of April Fool's Day had finally been solved. Joseph Boskin, a Boston University professor, had discovered that the celebration began during the 4th century, when Emperor Constantine...
Yep.
That's such a hard word for me to say. Jokingly appointed a court jester as ruler for the day. As a temporary ruler, the jester immediately decreed that only the absurd would be allowed in the kingdom on that day, and so the tradition of April Fools was born. The story ran in hundreds of newspapers and was widely believed until several weeks later when Boskin confessed that none of it was true and he really had no idea how April Fool's Day started.
I thought they had a prevailing theory about April Fool. I thought, because from what I heard, the prevailing theory was that in the very ancient world, the spring, April 1st, spring would be basically the beginning of the year.
I honestly have no idea. I just thought that one was really well done because it's so believable.
But then when Christians came,
right? It is.
Apparently, according to the legend, if it's true, when Christians came in, they basically said, "No, you guys are idiots. It's not April 1st. It's January 1st, right after Christmas. You know, that's when the beginning of the year is. So that's why they call it April Fool's Day because they were mocking the pagans. I frankly don't know if this story is true or not." But that's what I heard.
That would be another great April Fool's joke if it's not.
Right? And
There
who the
you
fuck
go.
knows? Because the whole thing's about lying to people.
See if we can get the Associated Press to pick it up and run with it.
I love a good April Fool's joke.
Yeah, I know you do.
One of them I thought was really cool. And when I was driving to Tacoma in Seattle, right by underneath Seattle there, and I was delivering something, and the radio station was making this high alert, and people started calling 911. There was a leak of dihydrogen monoxide in the port. One of the boats was leaking dihydrogen monoxide, and
Oh, that's awesome!
and people are calling saying, "Okay, how is that going to affect our water supply?" Blah blah blah. And it's like dihydrogen monoxide.
H2O.
That's awesome. The water's gonna mess up my water, man. Like, you don't know.
Well, and this is not even 10 years ago. This prank happened, I think. And actually, the radio station. I heard something about that. The radio station got into trouble for making that prank as well.
Really, I wonder, similar to the comedy saying the Seattle Space Needle had collapsed.
Oh man, crazy. I got one too that got me. Well, actually, I got two real quick here. That got me pretty good. And the first one was the invention of the hoverboard, the actual.
Oh, I remember that. That was just a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it was it was Doc Brown did the ad on YouTube and everything, and they get him out and Tony Hawk's on it. Yeah, this is really easy to ride.
That was not long ago, 5 years ago.
I never saw that. I didn't love Back to the Future.
It pissed me off so bad when it wasn't true, because I was looking online where I could buy one. I was serious. I wanted that.
Oh, well, yeah, of course.
And it was not real. The other one was the production of the movie Zelda. It was they did a very elaborate trailer on YouTube, and I was sold, man, and I didn't even think that it was April 1st. It did not even occur to me that had come out on April 1st, and I was really looking for it. And then they're like, that was an April Fool's joke, you dummy. I'm like, oh, fucking what? Don't do that to me. I'm not good with that. I'm not going to know that I'm being tricked. I'm the worst for these things.
One of the ones that didn't make the list was YouTube rickrolled the internet.
YouTube rickrolled the internet?
You know what a rickroll is, right?
No.
So a rickroll is when you click on a link thinking you're going to go to something, and instead you're redirected to a video of Rick Astley singing, what's that song?
Never Gonna Give You Up?
Never Gonna Give You Up, yeah. So it's called a rickroll. It's very common. It was what that Seymour group was on Facebook for a very short period of time. And so what YouTube did is every featured video rickrolled to the Rick Astley song, and they did it to everybody. Millions of people got taken in by YouTube. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually,
go YouTube. I don't know when that was. That makes a lot more sense
why I kept going to that song for no reason back a little bit of there. I had never heard of this, but that's really funny.
There are some legendary pranks. I mean, I remember a prank that was, this is a very old prank, I think it was in the 1930s. They made a prank that somehow they would while everybody was desperate for a job, they put out an ad in the paper that they needed hundreds and hundreds of men to cut off the tip of the island of Manhattan. And they were supposed to pull it out into the river, flip it around, and bring it back and reattach it. And apparently this is true, and apparently hundreds of people were standing in a lineup to apply for that job.
That wasn't on my list.
No, but that would have been a great prank to have on the list.
I read 100 different jokes yesterday, and that one wasn't one of them.
That's almost mean when you think about it. During the Great Depression, to do that joke, it's geez,
that's
man,
cruel.
That's cruel, but it's funny.
Is it true? Have you fact checked it, or?
It's been a while, so I'd have to go back. I'm pretty sure it's true. Anyway, Brent, my friend, you got another brilliant moment for us?
I do. I have another brilliant moment brought to you by religion. So this is sort of a kind of story that's been sort of unfolding for a couple weeks now. I am a big fan of this dude, Telltale. His name is Owen Morgan, but his YouTube show is called Telltale. Mm-hmm. And he's just a really chill dude. I really like him. His voice is very calming. Mm-hmm. It just makes you kind of want to just relax and stuff. He's just a nice guy. And so what happened was his daughter went to the school that she's attending. She's in middle school. She's in 8th grade. And she is going to health class because it's middle school, it's 8th grade. That's when you start learning about this stuff. And he's in West Virginia. Oh no! So I think you might know where I'm going with this. But she ended up recording this teacher, basically shaming a bunch of atheist kids, or saying that God, you know, that she can't understand how God doesn't exist and all this stuff. And she recorded it. And actually, here, I have some of the quote here. Let me read some of, like, what she actually said. And I had to actually write this down from the video because they didn't put, because she talks so weird that I feel like quotes, like, would be weird. But I feel like I can read it and it'd be kind of fun because it's interesting the way she talks. She said, when you get into 8th grade, you start studying how dangerous sexual thinking and behavior, what it can do to you, okay? Now, this is why they didn't put the quote, I think. What it can do to you, okay? And I'm hoping that you all were brought up by a good family or person, whoever is raising you, that they are teaching you right from wrong, and that it's not okay to be sexually active.
Oh, God.
Which... right there, I'm already like, what the fuck? Like that's you're already wrong. Like the end of your first sentence, practically. But if you look at the Bible, this is a public school and health class. If you look at the Bible, it says sex isn't for love. What?
It's not.
It's for what? And then they all like kind of answer, and they're like, yeah, exactly. Babies. They're like, you can hear them in the background there. And then she doesn't address that, but then she says, when is the time that you should? And then everybody kind of answers, after marriage. That's right, after you're married.
Oh, this is the teacher doing this?
This is nauseating.
This is a school. Yeah, this is a public school in West Virginia.
Oh.
And that's what the teacher's trying to preach?
Yeah. In the public school.
I thought it was the kid.
No.
No, this is the teacher. This is the teacher.
Oh, I'm so sorry, U.S.
And then this is where it gets really crazy, because it's like she understands that she's doing something wrong, but she's continuing to do it anyway. So you would not believe how many kids were against me on my first and second period. You would have a heart attack. It makes me sick how they this is where it gets weird too. Her talking, it makes me sick. What's what you say? It makes me sick how they believe, and I'm thinking the upbringing that you guys are having from your parents. Now, I'm not saying anything about your parents, but
you are.
Yeah. You know, I don't like Dr. Phil all that much, but he has this saying where he goes, when you say X, Y, Z, but, what you're really saying is ignore everything I said before the word but. Now I'm going to tell you what I really think.
Yeah, exactly. That's so, I mean, that is true a good majority of the time. Yeah. It's just different these days, and I hate it. They say everything you are teaching they say everything you are teaching in your sexual wellness class keeps referring to the Bible. And I say, well, because I'm right. But, you know.
You're right, this is another brilliant moment. Oh, man.
But, you know, you can't force anybody to believe in God. Whether you do or don't, it's your opinion. I just can't get my head to where people don't really think there's I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of shocked. Like that's a real quote from a real teacher.
In class while she's teaching.
Well, how old were the kids?
Grade 8, so 13?
They're, what?
14? 13, 14? That's how old they were?
What's 8th grade?
Yeah, 13, 14.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, like,
I was 12, so yeah, 13.
Wow.
Yeah. And so now the story developed even further. So what happened was Owen basically went to the Freedom from Religion Foundation and was like, dude, what do I do about this? You know, I have this recording, I have evidence and everything. And they were like, okay, well, you can, you know, and he was like, can I make a video about it, or what, you know, what am I allowed to do here? And they were like, go ahead and make the video, but leave her name out of it. And we'll take care of it. We're gonna write a letter, and they did write a letter, basically stating like that she obviously knew that she was doing something wrong, but she did it anyway. You know, through what she was just saying there, basically, and you know, he was like, okay, so they sent the letter, and then another story in the atheist, the Friendly Atheist blog, you know, has come out. And it's the second one. And he did another video because, like I said, I watch his videos. So I saw this when he first did it, before any of this actually, before it made it on the Friendly Atheist or anything. But yeah, and so he had put this out there. They got the letter at the school. She got in trouble. I don't know if I don't think she got fired though. She just got in trouble at school.
She'd be fired out of a cannon into the sun.
What if I refuse? Then you'll be fired. Fine. Out of a cannon into the sun.
Right. Agreed.
No, and then she they started a Facebook group that was of the people of the town that he's in West Virginia, started a Facebook group that's whole purpose was doxing him. And they gave out the phone number for him. They gave out the phone number for his 12-year-old daughter.
Oh,
like, you know, I mean, that's like
that's bad.
That's gross.
Right, like, and now they're like coming after him. They're attacking him. He's getting death threats, you know, on a regular basis and whatnot. He's like, I'm not even going out to dump my trash. You know, that's how crazy these people are when you just tell them to follow the fucking law.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Wow, that's insane. And, you know,
scary.
One of the things that kind of irks me the most about this kind of thinking is they're so scared to talk about sexuality to their kids, yet they have no problem teaching their kids gun safety. Right? You know, if you teach your kid gun safety with the idea that, well, it's better safe than sorry in case my kid gets close to a gun, chances are your kid's never going to get a gun in their life. Well, maybe if you're an American, there's a good chance, but, you know for sure your kid will have sex eventually down the road. So if your kid, you know for sure your kid's going to have sex, don't you think with the same mentality you should teach that kid about safety with sex? First,
right?
You know,
we just want to teach kids how to take lives away, not how to bring them into existence. That's like really what the
you know, if you're going to use the whole safety angle, I mean, it's like I really don't understand that. Why? It really is just these adults just being embarrassed to talk about sex.
It is,
and it's just that.
Yeah.
They were brought up to be taught that it's a dirty thing,
and they're embarrassed.
Yeah. And it's time to change.
Well, no wonder
that narrative.
No wonder penises are shrinking, right?
Exactly. Because people aren't talking about the penises. Well, they need to talk about the penises all day, every day.
I'm just glad I'm not the only one now.
Anyway, about penises, what are you thought?
We do need to get, and thankfully that generation.
Did you just ask me what are my thoughts about penises?
Yes. I'm going to start every conversation with that. Yeah.
Well, I think they're fantastic.
I think they're okay half the time. Yeah, cool. Half the time. The other half.
Well, you know, sometimes I wish I had a bigger one, like an AR-15 with a sack on it.
You know, it's really funny that I've never heard of gun nuts. We talk about it on our show, 2 weeks ago or something like that. And I've been listening to the radio a lot because I've entered a contest, so I'm waiting very impatiently for my name to be called. And as I'm listening, the radio show the very next day, she's talking about gun nuts.
There we go.
And something else
she was listening to the show.
It was well, our show hadn't even made it on air yet, so it was. Somebody called in and talked about the gun nuts. I can't remember. It was something else because she started talking about, you remember truck nuts and how now they've got them for whatever, and I can't remember what it was. And then someone texted her and said, well, what about these gun nuts?
I've got this awesome. I've got this picture I use on Facebook. It's a cartoon of a guy, you know, with an AR-15. He pulls his tidy whities and looks in there with a frown, and then he puts his AR-15 inside his tidy whities.
With a big smile. Look of satisfaction on his face. Oh, it's sad.
Like gun nuts explained. I love it.
Right?
That's so cool.
We're gonna have to do a PSA for homosexuals for sure. Well, thank you so much for that there, Brent. So let's take a quick pause, and when we come back, we'll be talking to the one, the only, David Fitzgerald.
Exciting.
It's gonna be fun. We're gonna be talking about the lesser-known Gospels, so you just stay with us.
Do you know where Saskatchewan is? Probably not. It's in Canada. If you do, you might know a city named Regina. In Regina, there's a studio. And in that studio, there are, at least once a month, a bunch of skeptical atheist geeks and goofballs who get together to do a podcast. We are the Brainstorm Crew, and we're trying to help spread a bit of reason and critical thinking while still having fun. Never taking things too seriously, but still not accepting everything we're told. We go through different topics, exploring them in depth, and often disagreeing. We try to stick to provable facts, and we never trust a myth. That's why we say we're woo-free since 2013. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spreaker under Brainstorm, or check out our website, brainstormblog.net. I can't promise you'll always agree with us, but I can promise you'll have fun listening to us.
Attention, fellow atheist podcast listeners.
We are the Godless Heathens podcast.
Here's the details with no fine print. You got new episodes available every other Sunday.
Sunday! There's 3 of us, just like the Holy Trinity.
I'm Don.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jerry.
Coming to you from a spare bedroom in exurban Atlanta,
where we'll examine the crossroads of politics and religion, but from the secular perspective.
Sometimes we get heavy, sometimes we get deep.
And no one is above reproach or mockery, especially each other.
It's more of what you want and less of what you don't.
So open your hearts and minds to the Godless Heathens in your podcast rotation.
And you just might learn something too.
And there hasn't yet been a properly written apology for that disgrace. Staying in Africa, I think it will one day be admitted with shame that it might have been in error to say that AIDS is bad as a disease, very bad, but not quite as bad as condoms are bad, or not as immoral in the same way.
Next guest is our returning champion. He is an author, a historian. He wrote such books as Time Shards and Jesus Mything in Action, and a good friend of ours. He's a snappy dresser and a sassy dancer. David Fitzgerald, welcome back to Left Naghamadi 2.0.
Woohoo! It's so good to be back. It's been a long time.
It's been too long, my friend. How have you been?
I've been good. I've been working on a new book, the 3rd book in our science fiction trilogy. Is coming out, and in the meantime, I'm working on Sex and Violence in the Bible.
Wow, it's okay. Before we get to a subject, let's get those 2 right out of the way. So the 3rd book, your 3rd book of your Time Shard trilogy is coming out soon.
Yes, I'm very excited about that. That'll be coming out in June. The first book was called Time Shards, the second one was called Shatter War, and this 3rd one's going to be called Tempest Fury. And very fun sci-fi adventure series, kind of a time travel post-apocalyptic mashup. It's very, very fun, and I'm very excited about it. And the reviews have been really great.
So is that the one where you have to drop a ring into a volcano, or is that another thing altogether?
That's a different one.
That's a different one.
Got too much. You got too much.
So it's coming out in June. So if people want to find out more about the Time Shards series, and where can they find those?
Anywhere books are sold, Amazon is probably the easiest way to find it. I hate to say it. So go to your local bookstore or independent bookstore and order it from them instead.
Mm-hmm. So if just without revealing too much of the plot and all that, if you were to say, how do I describe Time Shards to somebody who's never heard of the book, what kind of adventure story is this?
Yeah,
I know it's hard.
Kind of long I do is that the book is about what happens when time shatters, the timeline shatters, and all these people from all these different places in time get thrown together and have to figure out A, what's happening, and B, how do we save the world? And it's a really interesting cast of characters from modern day people. There's a modern girl from San Diego. There's a first century Celt from Britain. There's some Victorians. There's a World War II commando, and all this ragtag group gets thrown together in this landscape where never know if you're going to run into a dinosaur next, or a knight in shining armor, or a robot from the future.
Nice.
Sounds interesting.
I like this already.
Fucking brilliant.
Super fun. It's been super fun. It's funny because I write a lot of nonfiction and some fiction as well, and I love going back and forth between nonfiction and fiction, because nonfiction, you have to research it, and you have to have footnotes, and you have to document everything. And nonfiction, you don't have to do any of that. Fiction, you don't have to do any of that. You just have to make it all up. And then when you write a time travel story, all of a sudden it's the worst of both worlds, because you have to do all the research and you have to make it all up.
God!
So you have to make your science believable in a time travel story.
Exactly. Especially as a history writer, I want to get all that stuff right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been super fun. I think it's the most challenging book we've ever written, the two of us. And
it's a collaboration with your better half, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's awesome.
How come she's not on the show? Where the hell is she? Go get her.
We'll have to get her next time.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to that. And you know what? At the same time, I think you just really proved that once and for all that the Bible is fiction, because there is no footnotes in the Bible.
Exactly.
Bam! We just cracked that case wide open right there. It is a book of fiction. Checkmate.
I love it.
So, David, today we wanted to bring you on because God knows with your books that you've written down, like Jesus Smithing in Action and all these other fantastic tomes you have, you've done tons and tons of research on the character that's central to Christianity. Jeebus, whatever you want to call him. And you yourself, you what you describe yourself as a mythicist. You don't actually think the character that Jesus was actually a real person, right?
Right, I don't. And the funny thing is all these things you learn as a side effect of researching something like the question of Jesus' historicity. You learn all this other amazing stuff quite by accident. That blows your mind. Well. And it's the same thing with this. Talking about all these alternate gospels today. We've got alternate gospels. We've got alternate Acts, epistles. All these Christian writings, all the Christian writings that we have in the New Testament, our New Testament, are just one faction of Christianity's version of Christianity. And we've got well over 200 other documents that still exist, not counting the ones that we've heard about, mentioned in other ancient books that we only know by titles. But we actually still have at least fragments, if not complete manuscripts, of over 200 of these, about 230 all total, if you count the New Testament. But yeah, so what we think of as Christianity is just the tip of an iceberg, and there's so many different other kinds of Christianities. There were, the Jewish-leaning Christianities that were the earliest, and there's the Gnostic Christianities, and there's the anti-Jewish Christianities. And what we think of Orthodox Christianity is what's come out on top. But for decades, if not hundreds of years, the ground rules of what Christianity weren't even set. I mean, we think of things like, Christianity, there's one God, but there's a Trinity, and, he had 12 disciples and all. And it's like, all these things we only know from these particular writings, but there were Christians who were saying crazy stuff that were nothing like that. And, like, what we would think of as the basic fundamentals aren't even a part of their reality. It blows my mind.
So you're basically saying that the Christianity that we kind of know today, and for love for Christians, I guess, is essentially the toned down version of what Christianity has been offering its readers all these decades.
It's the ones that made the cut. They're the ones that survived. It's funny. The further you go back into checking Christian origins, it's just fascinating how much more there is. Because, we've got our Gospels, we've got our epistles, but all our Gospels turn out to be based on the first Gospel, Mark. And Mark, we're lucky to even have it, because people weren't setting out to write 4 Gospels, the Gospel according to Matthew, Gospel according to Mark or Luke. They were all setting out to write the one true Gospel. And like Matthew and Luke, they liked a lot of what they read in the book of Mark, but, Matthew wanted to correct his mistakes, and Luke wanted to pretend like he was the only one who'd done the research and was writing the one true gospel. He starts his gospel by saying, so many people are writing gospels now, it seemed like a good idea for me to go back and check out the story that came down to our generation.
Yeah, don't listen to those gospels.
First couple of verses of his book, so he's the only one even pretending to write a history, and he's not even. Most of his stuff is stolen from Matthew and Mark.
I think that's
John.
Important. Yeah. So before we get into that,
John comes later. He doesn't even try to match up with those guys. He goes off in his own story all the time, and is constantly changing the stories that he has.
I think that's a very important point to make, because I think a lot of people that are vaguely familiar with the Gospels and the Bible think that you have 4 times the same story written by 4 different men, but it's essentially the same story. Mm-hmm. But it's really not that.
It's not to be further from the truth. Yeah.
And they're also not in order in which they were actually written. They always start with the Gospel of Matthew. And Matthew was not the first one written. You're saying the Gospel of Mark is an older gospel.
That's right. That's right.
So it's kind of like the Mark is like the Adam West Batman.
Oh, the Batman. There we go. That's a great analogy.
And
if you've seen the movie Batman and Jesus, it's an even better analogy than But yeah, Mark. There's a thing called the Synoptic Problem that biblical scholars noticed a long time ago, and it was that if you take the first 3 Gospels, they're not just similar stories, they're the exact same stories, word for word, except when they go off in their own directions. So it's either in lockstep with each other, or they're completely incompatible. So it's not even like, there's a difference in eyewitness testimony. It's like, no, that's not what's happening. They either are plagiarizing from each other, or they're going off in their own completely different directions that can't be harmonized with the others.
So for example, is it true, and you can confirm this, that for example in one of the Gospel, I believe it's Matthew, when they have the massacre of the innocent, Jesus is born and they flee into Egypt, and then into another Gospel, they don't flee into Egypt, they go back to Nazareth, which if you're a student of geography, that's like a 180-degree turn.
Well, it's even worse than that, because when you take Matthew's story and Luke's story, Mark doesn't even have a story. He starts his Jesus right out of the box at age 30. But Matthew's nativity story and Luke's nativity story, they don't match up at all. One is a scary political intrigue story with lots of danger and escapes to Egypt and stuff, and the other one is happy, lovely, good time story of good things happening to baby Jesus. But you read the stories differently; they don't match up at all. And our story that you see at the elementary school nativity play is a mashup where they've got the 3 wise men and the angels singing in they've got all the scary stuff and the happy stuff and have blended into a new happy story. It's fascinating.
Is there any evidence of a massacre of like King Herod trying to kill a bunch of Jewish babies?
Funny thing, there's none whatsoever. We have evidence of him being a shit to the Jews and doing horrible things, and we had lots of historians at the time who loved to talk about those kind of things that he did.
Right.
So yeah, the fact that no one else noticed that, it's just like the zombie apocalypse in Matthew's Gospel. No one seemed to notice that all the dead saints in Jerusalem came out of their graves and appeared too many. Yeah.
So for those,
but was it recorded by anybody?
Tell me the story. I don't know.
For those who don't know, in the Gospel of Matthew, when Jesus comes back from the dead, he resurrects, he's not alone. All the saints come out of their tombs as well, and they go on, they shake hands with people and have talks in the city. Yes.
Yeah, they were sitting around in the writer's room like, Jesus comes back to life, and it's like, it's just not good enough. Can we,
we need more.
Avengers Assemble.
Can we have all the saints? How about all the saints? All the saints. Just Jesus.
Them all out.
It's much better this way.
Kind of lame.
And then you do a focus on one saint who refused to come out of his tomb. So, no, I'm way too comfortable in here. I'm not coming out. These people are putz.
He was always a dick.
So yeah, and that's that zombie apocalypse, as David has described it, is only in Matthew. It's not in any of the other gospel. You'd think people coming out of their grave in the first century, somebody would have noticed. You know, the zombies are coming at you and having a chat with you while they're dead. Have been dead for 20 years, 12 or 100 years. You'd think you would kind of notice that.
At least like a letter or something. They're like, yeah, Paul came back to life, dude, and he said that he was sorry for, like, you know, that way at the wedding that one time when he got too drunk. Yeah, he was sorry.
His closet face ass. Oh, man.
So is it? What do historians think? What is the reason that these gospels are so similar yet so different?
Well, I was talking about the Synoptic Problem. What they think happened is Mark wrote his gospel sometime after the Jewish war with Rome, around the year 70 or so, and then a couple years later, or maybe even a couple decades, Matthew wrote an improved version of that. Then a couple of decades after that, Luke wrote his. And I say Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Those aren't their names. None of them are written by anybody who was an eyewitness to Jesus. None of them claim to be. And all of them were written generations after the events they picked. So right out of the box, the Gospels are once upon a time stories, talking about a time before the war with Rome, when everything was different and better.
So the good old days.
The good old days.
Made you do great again.
And John's gospel is even more different from those. Those are either plagiarized or they're completely different. John, he writes his own story. For instance, John's Jesus gets in trouble not for throwing the money changers out of the temple, which is why he gets in trouble with the authorities in the other Gospels. No, that's how he kicks off his career 3 years earlier. He gets in trouble with the Jews for raising Lazarus from the dead, and it's such this huge miracle that no one can deny it, and the leaders, the Jewish leaders, their evil schemes are going to be founded because they can't beat that miracle. And yet Lazarus doesn't even appear in the other Gospels at all.
Wow, so the timing's off by like years.
It's not just off by years, but it's like they're doing different things for different reasons. And I say John, but it's actually meant to be the disciple who Jesus loved, the beloved disciple. Who we never get his name, but there's good reason to think that the author wants you to think that Lazarus himself is the beloved disciple.
So you think somebody back then, if Lazarus comes back to life, you think somebody would say, "Hey, how is it like to be dead?" And you think somebody would sit down with him, do like a deep interview, say, "Hey, man, can you tell us
what was hell like? How was that like the fire? Right? Man? Like, what was that like?"
No, they don't even have a quote for the guy. I guess it wasn't. Lazarus wasn't kosher.
I don't know. I would say that was a Hail Mary, honestly, on my end.
But aside all the faults that we can find with the Gospels and everything that's in the Bible, the modern day Bible, let's call it that, there were many, many, many other books that didn't really make the cut.
Yeah, absolutely. For instance, let's just pull out
pick one.
There was a huge genre of what was called Infancy Gospels. And that was when early Christians said, "Oh, Jesus was so awesome, but what was he like as a little kid?" And Robert Price points out this is exactly the way we got stories of Superboy from the Superman. Living in Smallville with his dog, Crypto, and so we get these infancy gospels that tell stories from baby Jesus' life. And one story from this genre still appears in ours, and that's in Luke when Jesus, as a 12-year-old boy, gets lost in Jerusalem, and they find him in the temple teaching all the Jewish leaders what they're supposed to know. But my favorite infancy gospel is this Coptic infancy gospel of Thomas, I think it's called.
Nice.
But it's I don't know if you guys have seen the old Twilight Zone episode with the boy who wishes people into the cornfield,
No.
Children
of the Corn. That's not one.
Right. Anyway, baby Jesus in these stories is just the worst Dennis the Menace psychotic. A kid bumps into him on the playground, and he zaps him dead. Teacher tries to teach him, and he says, "You don't even know what the meaning of the letter A is. How are you going to teach me the letter B?" And blinds him, and he's just constantly fighting people. Right.
I just have this mental image of Jesus with his pet camel as a boy, calls him Camel or something like that. The Adventures of Jesus and Camel, and it's, oh my god, this is
Jesus and Camel.
Bet you he was like an awkward teenager with a big fro.
Camel's voiced by Chris Rock, so
Eddie Murphy.
But yeah, it's hilarious. Just the hijinks that he gets up to and the smitings that he does. Before he gets his baby teeth, so to speak.
His baby halo.
There's also, we talked about the big four Gospels, and I mentioned we're lucky to still have the Gospel of Mark because there were so much more popular Gospels than Mark's. And one of them was called the Gospel of Peter. And that one, we know it was at least 3 times as popular as the Gospel of Mark, because that's how many more we found than of old documents of Mark.
Do they claim that this Peter was actually the Peter?
Well, all of these Gospels claim to be in the name of somebody like that. All these names, for the most part, were invented in the 2nd century. So, like, for instance, our 4 Gospels were all originally anonymous, and they gradually took on a name, and there was, it was kind of an arms race, because it's like, oh, you got the Gospel of Peter? Well, I've got the Gospel of Matthew, and he liked him even better. Or, it's Mark, but Mark was Peter's secretary, and, Peter was even closer to Jesus.
That's so funny, because they would have the Gospel of the secretary of Peter in the book, but the actual guy, they wouldn't.
It makes sense when you see them, how they were competing with each other. And it's funny, we have writings in the 2nd century about the so-called Gospel of Matthew and Gospel of, I think, Luke, too. But the way they describe them, or maybe it's Gospel of Mark, but anyway, the way they describe these Gospels, it's clear they're not talking about our Gospel of Matthew or our Gospel of Mark, because they're completely different. And it's not until, almost the very end of the 2nd century that we find out that the 4 Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they're going to only be 4 because of reasons like there's 4 corners of the earth, so of course there's 4 Gospels,
There's something that kind of bothers me about these names, though. Matthew, Mark, Luke, Peter, these are not Aramaic names.
Don't let that bother you, because those are American versions of those names. Those names were actually Petros and Kephas and Jacob.
See, that makes more sense.
Marcus and Lucas, yeah. There are some interesting things about the names Luke and Mark. All those names seem to come from people mentioned in Paul's letters. Same thing with Jesus' disciples. They're all people that Paul mentions as being members of the early church in the Jerusalem area. So that's where those names are coming from originally. And where was I going with that thought? Let me get back to the Gospel of Peter before we go too far down your rabbit hole. So here we only have it in fragments, but the fragments we have of this gospel are amazing, because when Jesus comes out of the tomb, he's accompanied by these angels that are 250 feet tall.
Oh God, it's like Godzilla.
And Jesus comes out, and he's 500 feet tall.
Whoa!
That's in the cloud. Yeah. Giant Godzilla-sized, some god. And that's not even the craziest thing that happens. As soon as they come out, the cross comes out of the tomb.
Hold on. The piece of wood?
And the cross comes out of the tomb and starts talking to people.
The piece of wood he was nailed on starts talking.
Yeah.
Now the cross is actually voiced by Eddie Murphy. So you were close.
I picture Morgan Freeman for the talking cross.
Oh, that's a better one.
That would be better.
Definitely.
Jesus lay hanging on me.
But so you got giant Jesus and talking cross. and I also love in that gospel, the Jewish leaders start lamenting that, oh no, this means the destruction of Jerusalem in about 40 years, you know.
So they got a 500-foot tall Jesus. You think somebody would have noticed that from kind of afar? It's like, look at that. We got this really, really big guy we just nailed to a cross. He's coming back. The revenge of Jesus 2, the back, whatever you want to call it. And nobody makes a peep about this. What?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, too, when you read the book of Acts that Luke was meant to have written. He says things like, you know, so Jesus shows up to his followers for 40 days, and there's a verse that says, and convinced him by many convincing evidences that he was really him. What arguments do you need to prove it? You know? And again, it's like, where are the Romans during all this? It's like, you know, back in those days, if you crucified somebody and he got back off it, you just crucify him and do a better job the second time.
Yeah. And if this was changed this time, come on, do something.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, how come all these other guys weren't arrested at the time if there was some illegal operation? And it's funny, too, because sorry for another rabbit hole, but in the trial accounts in Acts, it kills me because when they say, what are these guys in trial for? It's some weird, obscure Jewish law thing. It's like, no, it's about this guy who was just hailed as the king of the Jews and crucified in Jerusalem, and it is like, how could the Romans all suddenly forget about that?
Yeah, he was 500 feet tall outside the city. Can't you see that? I mean, come on.
You know, they're upset because Peter healed a beggar in his leg or something like that. It's like, whoa, that's too big. We can't put the lid on that.
People would see that all over the place.
You know, that's always been one of my problems with Jesus. I mean, is he heals a leper. He doesn't give you a cure for leprosy. He actually heals one leper. If he's the Son of God, he thinks that, no, guys, just do this concoction here and chemicals, and that's it. You don't have to worry about this disease ever again. No, he just heals one guy. It's like, it's kind of a failure.
Good point.
Yeah, it is. Oh, where should we go on next? We can do.
So we went to Thomas, who was acting like a little shit all this time, and then we got Peter, who he goes to fight the Godzilla size.
That's the. Let me make sure I've got the title exactly right here. It's the. Come on, where are you? It is the Infancy Gospel of Thomas.
The Infancy Gospel of Thomas.
Not to be confused with the Gospel of Thomas, which is a different one.
No.
The Gospel of Thomas is interesting because it's a list of sayings. It's not really so much a biography story as it's the secret wisdom that Jesus only taught to his inner circle. And it was written by his twin brother, Thomas Didymus, the twin. And the funny thing about Thomas's name,
same name. Why would you do that with twins? That's the dumbest shit to do.
Then you never get them mixed up.
It's dumber. His
Mom was just lazy. She just wanted to call one of them for supper. Tom!
Yeah, they both come running in. Both shell Toms. All right.
Why can't you be more like your brother, Jesus? The crazy thing about Thomas Didymus the twin is that Didymus is a Greek word for twin. Thomas isn't even a name. It's the Hebrew word for the constellation Gemini, the twins.
Oh, God.
So the name Thomas Didymus the twin means twin the twin. I think we got the message. I think we get the symbolism here.
Laying it on pretty thick, okay?
This is just about as ridiculous as Monty Python's Biggest Dickus, you know? This is just ridiculous. Twin.
Fact. It's not as funny as Biggest Dickus, but when you read the Gospels, the place names and the character names usually have a significant symbolic value to them too, as if they're all, made up characters that, for instance, Joseph of Arimathea, no one's ever been able to find Arimathea. No one There's no ancient writings that talk about Arimathea except for the Gospel of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. Before that, no one's ever heard of Arimathea, and after that, no one's been able to find Arimathea. But Arimathea, when you break it down, it's era, like the word aristocrat means highest. Era, math means disciple, like the name Matthew means disciple. Mm-hmm. And Thea means place, so it's the place of the best disciple. It's where Joseph comes from.
Oh my!
It's like a bad selling job.
Luke is writing his gospel to a guy named Theophilus, which means lover of God. So it's like and we can over and over. You see this that the place names and the people names, the character names, are totally apt. Almost too apt.
I mean, it's like Pilgrim's Progress level of dumb. Like, this is, guy's name's Christian. He goes to a place.
Yeah, it's totally true. And I'm totally convinced that Mark wrote his gospel as an allegory, and that it was much more obvious to people who spoke Greek that it was an allegory, because not only was he like rewriting scraps from the Jewish scriptures, but it was because of weird name games like that, you know.
You know, that's kind of funny because, you know, as a French Canadian, I wasn't raised on like cartoons like Captain America and all that the average American kid was, but I was raised on French cartoons.
It's Captain Canada, and he's not as cool.
I was raised on French cartoon, which is something like Tintin and Asterix and all that. And in Asterix, for example, all of the names actually have a double significance. You know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Asterix, of course, is like the Asterix, right? And you'll have like the druid is called Panoramix, which is like panorama. You know, they all have. There's one of the guys that's called 4 and 2 6. You know, 4 plus 2 is 6. You know, it's exactly like that.
That's awesome.
It's exactly like that. You know, it's the same kind of nonsense.
It is, and it's not as apparent to us how obvious it is. But you know, back in the day, he fully expected his educated readers to get all the nuances of what he's doing. But he wrote his gospel in this coiny Greek that was like a folksy Greek, like, you know. Andy Griffin type. Well, y'all, they went down to here, and it was, you know, this simple folksy version of Greek, and but he was doing very sophisticated things theologically and literarily, if you will. So it's fascinating. Wow. What else we got? Let's see.
This is just like the level of embarrassment your kid has once they realize Santa's not real. You know, it's like at some point the religion's going to fall apart, and people are going to say, "I can't believe we believed this shit all this time. It was so obvious that it was just bull."
You just ruined a bunch of kids' dreams.
And the deeper you look at it, the more obvious it seems in hindsight.
That's amazing. Okay, so we went with Thomas, 2 Thomases, and we went with 1 Peter. What else you got?
Well, I would mention how we had different genres of Christianity. Like we had the Jewish versions, and they all had their different Gospels and Apocalypses too, and Acts and Epistles. One of them, the Gospel of Thomas, what we were talking about, is considered a Gnostic Christian because the Gnostic Christians believed a lot of different things. In fact, you know, if you talk about what Christians believe, you're already kind of screwed because Christians believe so many different things depending on which version of Christianity you're talking about. Well, it was the same with Gnosticism. There were some basic things that they all seemed to believe, but they were a wide, convoluted mess of different ideas too. But their basic idea was that people were bad and the creation of the world was bad, and the Old Testament God who created the world was just a mistake, and he wasn't the real super God. He came down from the real God, and he was going to free us all by giving us wisdom so that we could transcend, the physical prison of our flesh and become spirit beings again. It's kind of, there's a lot of kind of
New Age
Scientology about it.
That does feel like Scientology.
There were sparks trapped in matter, whatever Scientology, not the Heathens, but
well, it's just as descriptive as Scientology or any New Age thing out there. Is sparks trapped in stuff. Yeah, that sounds about right.
But so you had all these weird little Gnostic Gospels, where like the Coptic Apocalypse of Peter or the Second Treatise of the Great Seth. And these almost all these came from a thing called Naghamadi, the Naghamadi Library, which was
it called? It was called the Septic. Something of the trees of Seth.
Sethian for complete. No, it's Seth. I see what you did there.
I mean, I misheard you. I was like, okay, there's some really gross trees apparently.
Septic trees.
It sound
SETH.
Septic.
Seth.
Okay.
Or Sethian.
My bad.
I prefer the septic trees. You know, they grew out of a septic tank.
Everybody's going to be looking up septic trees, and I just wanted to make sure.
Talk about toilets. We had all these Gnostics, and like there's an interesting thing that I don't really know a lot about the Gnostics. One thing that they keep getting in trouble with the Orthodox right-thinking Christians is Orthodox Christians kept accusing them of believing in that Jesus was just a spirit, and he didn't, he wasn't really made of flesh, and he just seemed to be flesh, but it was all just an illusion. And we don't really have a lot of their own documents telling us this. We have a lot of early Christian documents saying this is why they're full of crap, because they believe he was a ghost, blah blah blah. But when you, for instance, like the Ignatius, the letters of Ignatius, he's constantly talking about those people who talk about that they deny that Jesus was really born and really did these things and was really crucified, and I get the feeling that what most Gnostics were teaching was not that Jesus was a ghost, but that Jesus didn't really exist, that he was a spirit, and was the Holy Spirit, and all this stuff didn't happen on earth. And in fact, we have an epistle of it's called the Epistle of the Apostle, oddly enough, if I'm getting that one right, that it's blaming Orthodox Christians for getting it wrong because they take things like the virgin birth literally and the resurrection of Jesus literally when they're really allegories symbolizing deeper spiritual truths. And the fact that you actually have people writing this down out loud blows my mind, but it's such a hint and a half that Christianity started with a Jesus who didn't exist on earth.
Interesting.
Was one that was preached about.
You know, there was this thing called the Event, and it splintered the timeline. So see how you got your.
That is brilliant. That is brilliant, Brent. This is all tied into Time Shark. That's brilliant. I love that. That's the conclusion of David's third book. You don't see it, and you just spoil the ending there. Turns out Jesus is the event.
I'm bad.
What's funny about that is I actually deliberately tried to avoid religious things like, I didn't want Jesus to show up, or Moses, or all these figures who I don't think really existed. Mm-hmm. I didn't want any of them to show up in the book. So I kind of steered away from doing religious themes, and yet, since these places, things are happening in I don't want to give away the book, but religious things kept popping up in the book, and they're like getting in trouble with religious people, and we'll keep fighting each other because you can't get people from different times and lines to agree on things like religion, and it just it's a lot tough.
That'd be a task right there. That's
pretty.
I don't want to way, but like especially in the second book, there's some crazy things happening in book 2.
So how do we end up with the Gospels as the way we have it now? I mean, these are all a very interesting book, but there must have been some kind of council at some point that came together and basically said, this is going to be canon, and these guys are not. Yeah.
I mean, everyone points to the Council of Nicaea, but really it was a much messier process than that, and it took decades, centuries and centuries and centuries, and you could argue that it never has been sorted out because we still have all these books, the Apocrypha, that are kind of halfway between the Old Testament and New Testament, and the Roman Catholics accept them, but the Protestants don't, and there's books that the Greek Orthodox have that we don't have, or the Catholics don't have, and vice versa. I mean, you can go around and around. Our earliest complete New Testaments only go back to the 4th century, and we only have 2 of them, and they don't agree with each other. They have books we don't have. We have books they don't have. They both disagree with each other. So it was largely a process of, did your faction agree with what this guy said? Well, then it was probably legit. Did he disagree with it? Well, then that was a forgery that some heretic made up. You know? And that was it. And I mentioned the Naghamadi library. The Naghamadi library was 52 books that one day they got a letter from the Bishop of Rome saying, yeah, all this kind of books, these are our heretics now. These are heresy now. So they loved these books, so they hid them away to dig them up later, and we didn't find them until the 20th century. And when we did, we're reading all these books that blew our minds. Most of what we know from the Gnostics themselves comes from those books. And you would not even recognize it as Christianity at all. It's like they're debating how many gods there are. Are there 1? Are there 2? Are there 365?
Wow.
Was Jesus in the flesh? Was he not? Everything just as weird and as variegated as anything in early Christianity. But a completely different world. And again, we just lucked out and discovered those in one spot. Otherwise, we would have no idea how weird Christianity was and how different it was. And who knows what we've never found yet. You know, all these ones are only mentioned in other people's writings. Letters of Paul that didn't make the cut. Letters from people forging the name of Paul.
Yeah, it's really hard to. I mean, I know historians have some techniques to decipher whether it's an original from Paul or not, but at some point it gets really nebulous.
It does, and the funny thing about that is, I talk about the letters of Paul and the letters in the New Testament. All the letters in the New Testament are probably, all the non-Pauline letters, like, Peter, John, those are all probably forgeries. There might be chunks of original letters, but for the most part, they're probably forgeries. Half of Paul's letters are forgeries, known forgeries, I should say, or widely recognized as forgeries. And ones that are authentic, air quotes, authentic Pauline, they're at least mashups of multiple letters that have been re-edited many times. So we don't have any originals of anything in the New Testament, and for the Old Testament too, for that matter. We have, as Bart Ehrman puts it, copies of copies of copies. And for the first 150 to 200 years, we don't have anything at all. And so we have no way of knowing what was written in the first 2 centuries of Christianity, the first century and a half of Christianity.
So I think that's probably one of the biggest problems with Christianity. There was actually nobody, we have nothing of any contemporary at all. The supposed time of Jesus, that, we have nothing at all from him at all at this time. And this is one of the most studied period in history, if I remember correctly, right?
It's up there, and we do have a lot of evidence for things in that century. We just don't have a lot of evidence for Christian things in that century. And there's a lot of evidence you'd think we would have, like church records, like more writings from just one guy named Paul. Where's everybody else writing?
Yeah.
Because we have these forgeries that came, generations later.
Because it almost seems like Paul was sort of the Joseph Smith of this whole thing.
Yeah.
That's exactly
I mean, just saying.
That's exactly it.
And it is weird. It is weird that that's the guy they picked as, we're going to keep all his letters, because those are our oldest Christian writings, are the quote unquote authentic letters of Paul.
I think they were just too lazy to do it, right? They said, "Oh yeah, this guy already wrote. Let's keep it."
But everything we have has been tampered with, been edited, added to, taken away from, and even if, like, Paul had written one of his letters and magically put it in a safe, and we just discovered it now, we wouldn't even know that was the original Paul. We would just say, "Oh, here's a weird letter claims to be from Paul with a lot of weird variants in it. You know,
yeah, exactly.
So the real one, yeah.
So how different?
It seems totally. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
It just seems totally plausible. Some guy named Paul was just like going down the street, and he's like, "This whole like cult thing's like really picking up, you know. Like, these people are starting to believe some of this stuff." And then he's like, "And I'm killing these people, right?" And then he's just like, all of a sudden, like, "Oh!" And he falls off his horse. He's like, "Oh man, I can't even see. I'm hearing. What's that, Lord? Oh, he's talking to me. God, no, I'm serious. No, I'm serious. No, I'm not looking. I can't see. I just said I can't see. I'm not looking. Man, I'm getting a message."
What I love about that is the truth is even crazier. Paul never tells us that story.
Yes, that's true.
Paul loves trying to prove that he's a real apostle, and he's a real Christian, not like those guys in Jerusalem who are fake Christians. But Paul never tells us that story. Luke tells it 3 times in 3 different versions. Paul never says anything totally like that.
You think that the greatest conversion story ever told would be actually told by the man who's been converted? It is not. Isn't that incredible?
Weird. So that even was fabricated. Wow.
Yeah, and it's amazing how these layers. It's like, because that seems like a bullshit story already. You know, it's like,
that's what I'm saying. I could see a guy doing that. You know.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the real story is he fell off his horse, and he wasn't embarrassed to be such a bad writer, so he just made up this whole conversion thing. No, there was just a bright light, and I fell off my. No, it's not because I'm a bad writer. It's just even bright light. There was a bright light.
I couldn't see.
It's so fun, and it's so funny. I mean, Luke. Every time he says anything about Paul, and we compare what Paul says about the same thing, they never match up. Luke falling out of his ass all the time about Paul.
Oh my God!
Always, but you can't both be right. Yeah, Luke seems to spend all his time trying to bring everybody into this big tent of Christianity. So he brings in Gamaliel, the Pharisee, and makes him a beloved guy. He brings in all the John the Baptist cult into Christianity. Ooh, I should talk about that too. So, John the Baptist. I love it. Now we know who John the Baptist is. It's Jesus' cousin, right?
Yeah, supposedly.
Unless you read the other gospel, in which they're perfect strangers, or they just met, or all 4 of them have a different take on John the Baptist. Well, the funny thing about it is, John the Baptist cult was a rival for Christianity for decades. Before it became part of Christianity. And when you read our Gospels, anytime Jesus bumps into disciples of John, they're always having arguments about, well, why do you guys do this? We do this, blah, blah, blah.
You guys are stupid.
We know that was the case, that they were a different cult, but we don't have a Gospel of John the Baptist, or do we? Because the first 2 chapters of Luke are all about John the Baptist, and Jesus is just inserted into them. And when you take the parts that have Jesus out of it, the story makes more sense. And I'll give you an example. In there, Elizabeth is Mary's cousin, and Mary and Elizabeth can't have a baby; she's too old, but through a miracle of God, boom, they give birth to John. It's a story that we also see with the prophet Samuel, and that whole story is taken from the prophet Samuel, including this song called the Magnificat that's sung by Mary in the Gospel of Luke, praising God for this wonderful miracle that he did in making her the mother of the Savior. But again, this story is taken from the story of the prophet Samuel, whose mother was also old and couldn't have a child, and yet God restored her womb, so she had a baby, so that makes a woman worth something in the Bible. And that song that she's singing is taken from a song about an old woman who can't have a baby, not someone whose baby is the Messiah. So they're putting Elizabeth's problem onto Mary. You know what I'm saying? Clearly, Mary was not the original singer of that song. It was Elizabeth, and it makes sense if Elizabeth sang it.
Yeah. And that's another thing that's always been a problem with me, because when Jesus apparently meets John, it's like, oh my God, he's like meeting him for the first time. You guys are cousins, apparently. Didn't you like grow up together? Your mother. It's like,
he's like me with my family. Like, oh shit, I totally forgot that's even you. Like,
to be fair,
what's your name again? What's your name?
40 cousins, and I have cousins I haven't met.
Yeah, but these two broads were pregnant at the same time.
Yeah.
I do feel your pain.
I have 40 some first cousins. I have like 50 second cousins, and I have no idea how many third cousins. I've lost count.
Yeah, but people back then, everybody lived in the same village or two. I mean, it's not like there was like 6-hour airplane travel between the two villages here. It's like, come on.
Maybe I'm just being devil's advocate, but maybe their families were warring and they didn't speak to each other because they hated each other.
Or maybe the whole thing is bullshit.
Sabrina, I totally take your point.
Equally valid. There we go.
It's as equally as made up.
Maybe all this, that, and the other is equal. Then you gotta really think about that.
We gotta keep moving because we got like about 200 gospels, and I haven't even gotten to the sexy gospels.
Let's go.
Skip right there.
Sexy gospel.
Yeah.
That's like an entire thing itself.
Yeah, hang on. Hey, Captain, stop fighting.
That's brilliant.
One of these gospels I love is the Gospel of Mary, because all the apostles are mansplainers in it, and Mary is her favorite, is Jesus' favorite apostle, and at the end of it, they're trying to kick her out of the He-Man Women Haters Club, and one of the apostles says, "Well, Jesus loved her more than us." So it's like, and then there's the Gospel of Philip, which also has Mary Magdalene as one of 3 women named Mary who always walked with the Lord, and it says the Lord loved her more than all the disciples and used to kiss her often.
Yes. And I should put that in the Da Vinci Code, the book by Dan Brown.
Right.
But they had the originals that demonstrated that they actually were together and had a kid, and I'm just describing the plot. It's a cut in at some point.
Jesus got freaky.
I love people who get all worked up about the Da Vinci Code, though, because it's like, yes, you're getting worried about layers of bullshit upon bullshit.
That's exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
No bullshit. Yeah.
Wait a minute. How is Mary related to Tom Hanks?
6 degrees of separation.
The girl that he's protecting from.
Tom Hanks is a secret disciple. I didn't know.
Yeah, I'd watch that movie.
Caliente.
It's funny too, hearing apologists talk about. Well, it was common in early Christianity to kiss fellow believers, so it had no romantic connotations to that. And it's like, I don't see the verses where it's like, the Lord loved Thomas more than all the disciples and used to kiss him often. You never see a verse like that. I got a better one here. There was a Gnostic group called the Borborites, and they had a ton of different sacred books. Like one that was named after Noah's wife, a Gospel of Eve, Apocalypse of Adam, a bunch of other weird named ones. Oh yeah, and they had a ton that revolved around Mary Magdalene. The questions of Mary, the greater questions of Mary, the lesser questions of Mary, the birth of Mary. And one of these, I think it was the questions of Mary, the greater questions of Mary, contained an episode apparently where Jesus takes Mary Magdalene up to the top of a mountain, where he pulled a woman out of his side and engaged in sexual intercourse with her. It gets better. Then, upon ejaculating, after doing it with this woman, Jesus drank his own semen and told Mary, "Thus we must do that we may live." Upon hearing this, Mary instantly faints, to which Jesus responds by helping her up and telling her, "O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt?"
Jesus is a cum vampire.
Holy
You can't
shit.
make this stuff up unless you're an early Christian writer, apparently.
See, that was what David Koresh was really pushing for that one. He was into that gospel.
Good one. Oh my!
And
it just gets better and better.
It's very funny hearing early Christians talk about groups like these Gnostics, because they're like, oh, and they have when they do the Lord's Supper, it's menstrual blood and semen, and they eat babies, and they just say the most ridiculous stuff. So
they eat babies. Where have we seen this before?
Sounds
and
sort
then there's what's called the Secret Gospel of Mark. Have you guys heard about this one?
No.
No.
Secret Gospel of Mark. Well, hang on to your hats for this one. It is apparently Clement of Alexandria, this early church father, wrote about this group called the Carpocratians, who had a gospel, a secret Gospel of Mark, that kind of gave the story that the rest of the gospel doesn't have. And do you remember in the Gospel of Mark when they're at in Gethsemane, the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus gets arrested, and for some reason there's a young, soft, naked boy who runs out of his linen closet and runs away naked, basically. And it's like, why is this scantily clad boy hanging around with Jesus and his 12 apostles? How come we've never heard about him before?
Well, we don't know where the Catholic priests got their ideas.
I was just going to say, Catholics are like, see, it's cool. Right?
They said it's all right.
Exactly. Well, Secret Gospel of Mark tells us who this young naked boy was. And he says that it's somebody, a rich young youth, who's mentioned earlier in Gospel of Mark, by the way, is raised from the dead by Jesus. And after that happens, let's read it from the book itself.
He grows up to be Donald Trump.
And he raised him. Now, don't even speak that evil name. Stretched out, raised him by seizing his hand. The young man looked at him intently and loved him, and he began pleading with him that he might be with him. So when they came out of the tomb, they went to the young man's house, for he was wealthy. And after 6 days, Jesus gave him a command. And when it was evening, the young man came to him wearing a linen cloth over his naked body and stayed with him that night, for Jesus was teaching him the mystery of the kingdom of God. The notes we have from Clement of Alexandria says, now, the words naked man with naked man do not appear in this story. And he's very insistent about that. Whatever happened. And he says, but I'll tell you what the true meaning of this really means.
Exactly.
And that's where the fragment ends, right as he's about to tell us what the true meaning of all that means. So we got the sexy gay Jesus and the naked youth in Gethsemane. The funny thing about this is it's an open question on whether that's a real thing or if that's all a hoax that was created by a gay biblical scholar named Morton Smith in the 50s. And honestly, I could see it going either way. I tend to think it's probably a hoax, but there definitely was biblical scholars who found that chapter in the book, and it was, so it was actually there in the book at one time. Now, whether that was something that Morton Smith put in the book, we'll never know, because they were never allowed to take out the book to get the ink checked, for forgery. And since that time in the 70s, the librarians of that monastery cut those pages out of the book. So, and now they claim that they don't know where they are. They're lost, for safekeeping.
And I think this is a perfect example of the entire history of Christianity. Whether or not you had original sayings like that, as soon as they didn't quite agree with them, they disappeared.
Yeah. Oh, and the Mormon church is worse than that. Wow. I don't know if you guys have seen Murder Among the Mormons. No. But in my book on the Mormons, I talk about this event in the 80s, the Mark Hoffman affair. And that's what this series is all about, this 3-part series. It's amazing. I'm shocked that it didn't finish the church, honestly.
Right? Well, I mean, I don't know.
Then again, look at the Catholic Church. So.
Yeah, it doesn't, it'd take a lot, I don't know, to get rid of that.
Just amazing.
I do have One question, real quick. So the woman at the well, I've heard, is added by scribes. Is that like, as a historian, somebody who researches this sort of thing?
Is that the one with Jesus being a real dick to her?
I think he may be mistaking the woman at the well for the woman caught in adultery, the one that let him without sin throw the first stones.
Yeah, that story. Yeah,
that story is definitely a later addition because it doesn't show up in our earliest manuscripts of the Gospels for like 300 years, 400 years. And when it does start showing up in in later Gospels, it shows up in different places. So it's pretty obvious that story was a later addition.
Actually, it was a circus tour. Jesus and a woman were just going around doing the same trick over and over again.
It's funny because that's one of the most beloved stories about Jesus. And I remember talking and saying, well, there's parts of the gospel that seem so real. For instance, and she starts talking about that story. You really see there's a human, and it's like, oh, honey, is bullshit.
It's brought up a lot when it's like trying to defend, because most of the stuff that we have that Jesus said is actually not that greatest stuff, man. Like, it's really not. I mean, it's and I remember like hearing the sermons. I used to be a Calvary Chapel evangelical that was like super, like I was homeschooled and super indoctrinated, and I remember hearing the stories of like Jesus saying, "You got to hate your parents." If you want to enter the kingdom of heaven, and everybody like, what? You didn't actually mean that.
Then they give everything that you own and give it to the poor. It's like, he didn't really mean that.
It's a metaphor. It's
funny. It's funny, Brent, because you mentioned that story of let he who has not sinned cast the first stone, and that always reminds me of a cartoon I saw as a kid, and it was so funny because you have that Jesus, posing to this poor woman, and let he who has not sinned cast the first stone, and the next picture over, there's this huge boulder on this chick, and Jesus looking up like, "Come on, Dad." I love that. Oh, David, one last question, because we've abused a lot of your time already. How different? You mentioned earlier in the show, like the earliest complete version of, I guess, the Bible that we have is like in the 3rd or 4th century. So I'm assuming you're referring to Codex Sinaiticus or Codex Vaticanicus, right?
Exactly, those two. Yeah. Those sometime in the early to mid 4th century.
So how different are they from what we have today? These books.
Offhand, there are some differences in, for instance, the woman in adultery is not in them. But for the most part, the differences are in the books that they chose as sacred and the books that they chose as heretical, and made the cut and didn't make the cut. Things like the letter of Barnabas and the Shepherd of Hermas, and some of our art letters. Like some of our letters, you have early Christian writing saying, "Well, obviously, 2 Peter is a total forgery." I mean, look at it. And they recognize this stuff early on. And their arguments still hold up. It's like, this is clearly a bullshit epistle. So that's a trickier question to answer in depth. But yeah,
fair enough. David, thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really appreciate this. But like I said, the floor is all yours, my friend. Plug your books. If people want to find out more about your wacky adventures and where they can find your books, where can they get them?
You can find me on Amazon anywhere, but again, if you find me on Amazon, buy it from your local bookseller because they're the ones who need the love right now, and they always do. Amazon's going to be just fine, but support your local bookseller. And you can get all my books, I believe, through there. They should be able to order them, both my science fiction books and my nonfiction books. It's Nailed, Jesus, Mything in Action, and the Mormons. And I would that very much. And actually, you could tell your listeners, if anybody wants to buy a book that I think I'm out of Nailed, but I have all my other books, if they want to buy them directly from me and get an autographed copy, I'll sell it to them cheaper than Amazon will, and I'm very happy to do that.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, just look me up on Facebook or shoot me an email at everybodylovesdave@gmail.com.
Or you can send us a message here at Left of the Valley and we'll pass you on.
There, yeah.
I love it.
And we'll just get our cut in the book as well, right?
That's
No,
right.
just kidding.
Everybody loves me. Fuck off.
David, my friend, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. You're always welcome back, no matter what. You want to come back, you let us know. But before I let you go, I gotta have you say, "Hey, this is David Fitzgerald, and I took a left to the valley."
Hey, this is Dave Fitzgerald, and I took a left at the valley.
Fantastic. And that was our friend David Fitzgerald. Oh, I love having David on. You just get to learn so much when David is on the show.
He's very interesting.
Yes. He's so how can I say that? He's entertaining. He's
engaging.
He's engaging. Mm-hmm. He's the kind of guy that he doesn't come at you like a snubby scholar or anything like that. He's the guy you can have a beer with and just talk about this stuff.
Yeah,
and he's
just like.
But he knows what he's talking about.
He's TED Talk material. That's a good way of putting it. TED Talk material. There we go.
He's fun. Like, he's educational. Like, he's the whole bag, man.
Yes. So whenever people go out there, you can even find him on Patreon, and I would highly encourage you to support his work because he does a lot of good work. And when you're an idiot like me, that sometimes you get to deal with historians and you're thinking, oh wow, you have, it's like, am I going to be smart enough to actually ask good questions? But David is so down to earth that it's like, yeah, he's one of the guys, and you just are attracted to him right off the bat. So anyway, I would say totally go and learn from him and everything. I've learned so much. And now, Brent, I'll encourage you to actually read some of his books as well.
Right.
That's a good song, so it's like
like I said, I'm listening to Jesus Mything in Action. And it's phenomenal. Like, it's a really, really, that's probably because I got about 5 or 6, and like I said, I'm trying to get through Kropotkin too. Yeah. And I go back and forth, and that's the one that I go to when I'm like, okay, all right, now we're back to like normal stuff that I am okay with.
Exactly.
Learning.
Exactly. We're learning a lot from
that I'm interested in.
Oh man! All right,
I think it's obligatory. Like, it's obligatory. You know what I mean? Like, it's.
Thank you so much for being on the show, guys, and thank you to our guest David Fitzgerald. You can find us at Left of the Valley on Facebook and on at LATV Podcast on Twitter. We will get a site eventually. I'm working on it. That's right. And you can send us an email at leftofthevalley@outlook.com. Brent, quick plug on your shows as well, please.
Check out Unapologetics, spelled with an X. We are on a little bit of a hiatus right now, but but you can catch me here and stuff like that. But and on the other show, The Happy Debating Atheist on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Check it out. We do a lot of debates, and I just kind of drop my thoughts and stuff like that. So definitely check that out.
Sweet. Sounds good. Okay, perfect. And you can also support us on Patreon, patreon.com/LATV, and you can become a patron like the Right to Reason podcast. And there's another one here. Trying to find it. Where is it? I can't even read it. Oh, goodness. Well, never mind. There's somebody else. I'll put a shout out eventually. This person.
You can add it in post.
I'll add it in post maybe or something like that. Coming up, next week we'll have our old friend Dr. Del Rey. We'll be talking about COVID-19 and the effects on human sexuality, so that should be very interesting.
Very
interesting. And we'll also have Janice Selby. I'll be coming from court from the Conference on Religious Trauma. We also have the 604 Atheist coming up, and a whole bunch more. I'm drawing a blank here all of a sudden. Jesus Christ.
You're really busy these days.
Too many guests.
Booking so many guests.
I'm just lost here. I'm all over the place. Anyway, we'll have some fantastic guests for you guys.
Sounds like fun.
And I'm just not giving you guys ahead of time, so you'll be surprised. You'll just pop up and you'll be surprised. Yeah. So you just have to tune into the show.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else?
Keep them on the edge of their seat.
Exactly.
Just listen to the show anyway.
Yeah.
Exactly. Who cares who's on?
I mean, we were the 2020 Canadian Best Atheist Podcast for 2020, right?
Yeah.
So, for Christ's sake, there's a reason for that. Probably because, like, there's 3 of them. That's not true.
It's not hard to win when you're the only one in the category.
That's not true. It was
I know it's not. Yes, I agree.
We won up against some pretty good fucking shows,
you did.
honestly.
Actually, we did.
We'll fight hard to continue that tradition.
Sounds good. Anything else I need to add?
No, have a great week.
Got it, man.
All right, guys. Until next time.
Fuck that.
The system is broke down, working backwards in the only action or tactic I plan to practice now is to tackle the party's hands are bloodstained, millions of murders by believers, and they're all in God's hands. And let me take a sec, don't mean to sound so hateful, but I swear to God, unintended, I find it disgraceful that many atheists are told to be quiet. You're not alone, speak your mind, time to let it be known. I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, and non-believer.